And thanks for joining me here. I'm Don Ma. Just a quick overview of markets today. S&P 500 and Nasdaq closed weaker on Tuesday. Of course, today's the first day of August, and August is usually seasonally slow for the stock market. S&P 500 hit a 16-month high on Monday and is less than 5% away from breaching its record highs. S&P 500 lost 12 points or 0.2%. Nasdaq lost 62 points or 0.4%. Dow rose 69 points or 0.1%. And U.S. job openings fell to the lowest level in more than 2 years last month. That's according to the latest labor turnover data by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The figure dropped over 30,000 to 9.6 million on the last day of June. And it's marking the lowest since April 2021. Postings grew in sectors like healthcare and state and local government, but fell in education, transportation, warehousing, utilities, and the federal government. Now, the drop is in line with tight labor market conditions, despite, hefty interest rate increases from the Fed to dampen demand. And at the same time, CVS has announced it's laying off 5,000 employees. The pharmacy says the reductions will primarily affect corporate employees, and the changes are part of an effort to cut costs and focus on health services. For example, like its primary care offerings. CVS currently employs about 300,000 people, to put it into perspective. And Toyota nearly doubled its operating profit in the first quarter, the Japanese automaker said on Tuesday. And it was helped by increased sales and productivity. Here's the report.
Toyota nearly doubled its operating profit in the first quarter. That's according to the Japanese automaker on Tuesday. It said earnings went up due to increased sales and productivity, as well as a weaker yen. The world's top-selling automaker scored operating profit of $7.8 billion, up 94% from a year earlier and above analyst forecasts. Toyota kept its forecast for $21 billion profit this year, although analysts predict it could go higher. Tuesday's earnings are the automaker's first since it laid out an ambitious plan to best compete in the global market for battery-powered vehicles. If it doesn't realise its plan, Toyota risks missing out on a rapid shift to electric vehicles, especially in China. It faces tough competition in the country from local rivals and price cuts by Tesla. Toyota said it would strengthen development of EV technology in China and make big cuts to manufacturing costs to become more competitive. In North America, another key market, Toyota said it had benefited from pent-up demand among consumers, that as the impact of a post-health crisis chip shortage wanes. Globally, the company sold around 2.5 million Toyota and Lexus luxury brand cars in the quarter, up 8.4% from a year earlier. Toyota shares were up 2.5% after the update.
Meanwhile, U.S. manufacturing appeared to stabilize at weaker levels in July amid a gradual improvement in new orders, but factory employment dropped to a 3-year low. And this is suggesting that layoffs were accelerating. The Institute for Supply Management, or ISM, said on Tuesday that its manufacturing PMI index edged up a bit last month. But even so, it's still the 9th straight month that the PMI index stayed in contraction territory, which, by the way, is the longest such stretch since the 2007-2009 Great Recession. Factory orders are still depressed and factory employment is shrinking. The survey's gauge on factory employment dropped to the lowest reading since July 2020. It's a very confusing time right now for the economy. A lot of mixed signals. Plenty of bearish indicators pointing to a slowing economy. At the same time, there's a lot of bullish indicators as well. Stock market is on the rise. Some analysts are starting to see a bright light at the end of the tunnel. Here's the report.
The U.S. economy may not be metaphorically cruising down a highway, but it's maintaining a nice speed.
A year ago, nobody thought a soft landing was even possible.
Some economists do think a soft landing, which means a cyclical slowdown without a recession, could in fact happen.
Most of our clients are not finding this a down period, but they are finding it a period of high uncertainty, mixed views on the economic outlook, obviously navigating a world of higher interest rates that haven't been seen for many, many years.
Among the reasons for this optimism, data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics last week shows the economy is cooling, but still resilient. The U.S. gross domestic product, in layman's terms, the country's economic scorecard, also grew more rapidly than expected from April through June. On the flip side, inflation is still higher than the Federal Reserve would like, and there's still a chance another interest rate hike could come in September.
I don't think the Fed can or should relax the 2% target, but I think it can be more tolerant of a world where the inflation number starts with a 2, but we're on a glide path to 2.0, but we don't necessarily get there fast.
In other words, the threat of a recession remains, but right now, the glass appears to be half full.
Tech giants Apple and Microsoft remained the top two global companies by market capitalization at the end of July. Apple last month became the first company in the world to reach a market value of $3 trillion. And Microsoft also beat Wall Street estimates for its fiscal fourth quarter revenue. Its market cap stood at $2.5 trillion at the end of July. Strong quarterly earnings from companies like Alphabet, Meta Platforms, and chip maker Intel and chip equipment maker LAM Research lifted overall market sentiment last month. And moving on, Elon Musk took a big step, completely replacing Twitter's blue bird with the letter X. And he's moving onward toward his stated goal of creating an everything app. But what major obstacles is X facing along the way? Let's hear from NTD's Colin Fredrickson.
The Twitter bird is now completely gone, replaced with X, one of the letters of the alphabet. What challenges does Elon Musk face as he tries to transform X into a successful everything app?
Brands take a very long time to build up, to build trust. It's also to the point that to tweet has become a verb.
Business professor Nicholas Creel says the sudden rebranding doesn't make a lot of sense. While the blue Twitter bird is known throughout the world, the X is something completely new. But it's not new to Musk. One of his first companies was called X.com, which was later renamed PayPal. Musk wanted to change the name back to X, but the board opposed it because the letter X is
mostly associated with pornography. And so a lot of people see that, and it kind of sends up a red flag, particularly in a large segment of the population.
Creel says many users and advertisers may be unwilling to associate with a product called X.
Elon Musk loves X. He's named his kid X when multiple companies have used X as part of it. There's a Tesla X model.
Social media professor Andrew Selepak says the rebranding shows people the app isn't just about microblogging. The name Twitter, the blue bird, and the term tweet have been strongly associated with just sending out short text posts.
X has a small user base compared to Instagram, compared to Facebook or YouTube or TikTok. So what I think Elon Musk is trying to do is seeing what other spaces can he enter the app into to get more people to use it.
One key additional feature is the ability to make payments. This could have a significant impact on the money transfer space.
Twitter has 450 million active users. So I think very quickly, if you were to offer payments, one, it can be a huge revenue driver.
Joe Cambarato is the CEO of fintech firm National Business Capital and has experience with payment apps. He says adding a money transfer feature is a big opportunity for X. Twitter's massive worldwide user base means many would have immediate access to the app, and they wouldn't have to go through a bank to send money internationally. This feature could also leverage the social aspect of X, making transferring money more of a social experience. Colin Fredrickson, NTD News.
And on the topic of AI, China has become one of the first countries to build guardrails for the technology that powers popular artificial intelligence services. Beijing's top internet watchdog recently unveiled the new guidelines for generative AI that will take effect in a few weeks. Let's take a look.
Meet Xi Jiajiang, a virtual idol powered by artificial intelligence to sell burgers in China. McDonald's hired Jiajia to interact with Chinese customers. The U.S. may be curbing AI chip exports to China, but the nation is fast becoming an AI powerhouse. The country's home to top tech firms leading the AI charge like Alibaba, Huawei, Tencent, and Baidu, creator of Xi Jiajia, boasts that its chatbot Ernie has beaten OpenAI's ChatGPT on several metrics. At the state-backed World AI Conference in July, billionaire entrepreneur Elon Musk praised China's AI prowess.
China will have very strong AI capability, is my prediction.
China has become one of the first countries in the world to regulate the technology that powers popular services like ChatGPT. In July, it unveiled interim rules to manage generative AI, saying it needs to be in line with the core values of socialism.
The Chinese government is trying to ensure that the use and application of AI will be aligned with its own set of moral principles that underscores its political and social stability. The government not only placed the burden on the service providers, but also on the users of AI services.
In January, China's new rules against deepfake technologies came into effect. Chinese authorities have detained people for allegedly using generative AI to commit fraud and create fake news. And while China is moving fast to regulate the industry, some critics warn that it may not be equipped to avoid an AI disaster.
Most societies kind of learn from disasters, but the PRC has a kind of propaganda machine that makes it hard to do that, where there's a sort of disaster amnesia. There's a kind of a chronic culture of crisis mismanagement in authoritarian regimes generally, and China's no exception.
Drexel cites China's zero COVID policy as a recent example of crisis mismanagement. But the danger posed by AI is not limited to one country. Top technologists the world over, including China, have signed this petition to warn of the risk of human extinction from AI.
As these systems get very, very powerful, that does require special concern, and it has global impact, so it also requires global cooperation.
China's new AI rules have a provision to encourage participation in global standard setting.
They are very keen to take part in shaping global regulation of AI.
For now, Beijing is steering its own AI future with a heavy hand to encourage Chinese tech success and ensure that artificial intelligence will not undermine the state.
And it seems the U.S. Labor Department is reporting an increase in illegal child labor. Of course, it comes amid a tight job market. And it seems like the U.S. Labor Department is reporting an increase in illegal child labor. It comes, of course, amid a tight job market with unemployment rates the lowest they've been in more than 50 years. Let's take a look at today's Consumer Watch report.
More U.S. companies are employing children for dangerous jobs. According to the U.S. Labor Department, illegal child labor is on the rise. The department found more than 4,400 children were illegally employed between October 1st, 2022 and July 20th of 2023. That's a 44% increase compared to the same period the previous year. Unemployment in the U.S. is at a near record low at 3.6%, and experts say a lack of workers has made it difficult for employers to fill jobs, especially in low-paying positions.
Employers are citing a labor shortage, but we really don't think that they should be balancing a labor shortage on the backs of teen workers.
The Labor Department also announced it issued $6.6 million in penalties against several employers it says violated federal labor laws, including PSSI, one of the largest providers of food safety sanitation in the country, saying it employed 31 children between the ages of 13 and 17 to work for meat industry giants like Cargill and JBS USA across Minnesota and Nebraska. In a statement, PSSI said in part, quote, "We don't want a single person under 18 working for PSSI, period, and take extensive steps to prevent individuals at the local level from circumventing our wide-ranging procedures." At 16 McDonald's franchise locations in Louisiana and Texas, the Labor Department says children as young as 14 operated dangerous equipment and worked long and late hours. At a Kentucky franchise, the department found 2 10-year-olds working without pay, preparing and serving meals, working the drive-thru and cash register, and cleaning the restaurants as late as 2 a.m. In a statement, McDonald's USA responded to the report saying in part, quote, "These reports are unacceptable. We are committed to ensuring our franchisees have the resources they need to foster safe workplaces for all employees and maintain compliance with all labor laws."
And a new study ranked the best and worst states to retire in. And some of the results may surprise you. Bankrate.com looked at 5 categories across all 50 states. And that's including affordability, overall well-being, the cost and quality of healthcare, weather, and crime. Last year, Florida ranked #1, but the state that came out on top for 2023 is Iowa. The Hawkeye State was named best place to retire due to its lower cost of living, affordability, but high-quality healthcare and low crime. The other states that round out the top 5 places to retire are all in the Midwest and South. That's including Delaware, West Virginia, Missouri, and Mississippi. Florida dropped to 8th. Experts say older Americans shouldn't rule out places that aren't traditionally top of mind for retirement. As for the worst states for retiring, the bottom 5 are all in the Northeast and West, primarily because of the cost of living: Massachusetts, Washington State, California, New York, and Alaska. And now here to talk to me about how to prepare for retirement is Lawrence Sprung, wealth advisor at Midland Financial. So the latest report from the National Institute on Retirement Security is, it shows that Gen X is facing a dismal retirement outlook. I found that the bottom half of earners have only a few $1,000s saved for retirement. So we're talking about people between 41 and 56. So my question to you is, let's just take the middle number here. If you're 48 years old, is it too late to start saving aggressively for retirement?
So Don, I'm right in this Gen X phase here, and I'm exactly that number. I'm 48. So, you know, it's a challenge, right? The benefit is starting early. So the earlier you get started, the better. But I think the bottom line is, for those that might find themselves behind the 8 ball, so to speak, it is time for them to figure out their way and figure out a way to start putting more towards their retirement, because I think what we're seeing now is really a result of many of the changes that have taken place over the last couple of decades, as far as the shift from defined, benefit plans to now defined contribution plans, where we're going to be responsible for our own retirement. So if you're not there yet and you're not above the median and you're well below, it's time to really get started in a big way.
So it seems like there may be some sacrifices that you might have to make. What do you think they are?
So again, I think it comes down to many of the things that I've talked about time and time again, and I talk about in my book, Financial Planning Made Personal. It really is very personal, and it's important to create a budget. It's really important, especially if you're in this position where you're behind where you need to be for retirement and you need to start saving. It's really imperative that you take a fine look at where your income's coming from, and more importantly, where it's going, and see if you can carve out any additional funds to put towards the retirement factor to get you on track. Now, the other thing is, which your viewers may or may not be taking advantage of, is if their employer has a retirement plan, number one is they should be enrolling in that. And 2, they should be seeing if there's any type of employer match, any matching contribution, because that's a potential way for them to maybe double up their contributions. In many regards, they may be putting away 3 or 4%, and the employer may be matching that. So that's an easy way. So look at the budget, see where you might be able to squeeze some additional funds to put away for retirement, and also check with your employer and see if there's any opportunities for you to defer monies there, and if they're willing or they are matching those contributions, because that might be an easy way to really ramp up those contributions too.
Okay, just to be clear, retirement comes from savings, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, you're good. Listen, when you retire, right, you're going to have to basically shift from getting a paycheck every week or every other week to basically creating an income stream from somewhere. So where's that income stream going to come from? Well, many folks, a major portion of their retirement tends to come from Social Security. That's one avenue. 2 is looking at either retirement accounts or savings vehicles. And then 3, maybe you have investments that you have that might be kicking off income that will produce a monthly income to allow you to live on. But you have to start getting in the mindset of understanding that at some point, the paycheck, if you want to retire and stop working at some point, that paycheck's going to go away. And how are you going to continue to live the lifestyle you want to live without that paycheck? And where are you going to create that from?
Okay, so here's another question. Whatever your salary is now, is it realistic to assume that you only need half of it when you retire? That means whatever your living standard is now, you're going to have to reduce that by half. What do you think?
I don't know that that's a realistic expectation. Many a times the families that we're working with, we look at things on the other side of the equation because the salary, the income in a household, it may be a single, it may be a joint. More importantly, you want to look at the expenses. What are the expenses looking like for the family? And many times we're seeing instances where the need is closer to 80% of what their current expenses are going to continue into retirement. And in some areas of the country where living expenses may be higher, it's closer to 90 to 100%. A lot of folks who are in the higher living expenses area where, it's a higher cost of living, they may not see a significant drop off in retirement, assuming they keep their situation status quo. So we typically look at that 80% number at a minimum. I think 50% you're shooting on the low side.
Wow, okay. How many percent should you be putting aside from your salary for retirement as a rule of thumb?
As much as you can. So, it comes down to as much as you possibly can. Obviously, when you're younger, you have the ability to potentially put in less because you have the time value of money working on your side and having that grow through compound interest. I think that the number that you're looking at, and we talk to folks all the time about that 10% magic number. If you could save 10% of your earnings every year, especially as a young person, that should put you in a pretty good position over the long haul. Now, depending on how much you have saved at this point and how old you are, you may need to look to, increase that number in that percentage, because if you're sitting around and you're 48, 49, 50 years old and you are below that median and you're at the lower end, and your expenses are relatively high, you may have to put in significantly more than that 10% number to get you back on track.
There's always these articles online that says, you need this much money to retire comfortably. As you mentioned before, it might not be entirely true because everyone is different. Some can retire with much less than others, right?
Planning is very personal, right? You can have a group of friends and one person may be able to retire comfortably on $1 million. One may be able to retire comfortably on 500, and one may not be able to retire comfortably unless they have 5 million. And really the drivers there to determine whether you're in the 500,000 or 5 million range is what's your cost of living? What do your expenses look like? If you're a family that spends $50,000 a year and that's your cost of living versus a family that's at $150,000 a year and you're planning on continuing that lifestyle in retirement, those two people are going to require much different levels of savings, and you really can't put a rule of thumb on that. So if one of them follows the rule of thumb, chances are, or both of them, one of them is going to be wrong. So it's very important that you get an understanding, and whether it's with us or another fiduciary advisor, it's all or a tool online. There are ways to take a look at what potentially you may need in retirement. You have to factor in what your cost of living is now, what you expect it to be, and don't forget about inflation, because if you're cost of living today is $50,000, it is not going to be that same $50,000 10, 15, 20 years from now, because those expenses are just going to go up through inflationary pressure alone.
So let's say you are behind the 8 ball, so to speak. Have you ever recommended people to put off retirement for a couple of years?
Yeah, that's something that has to be considered. There are only a number of different variables that can be changed when you're looking at retirement, right? The variables that you can change is you can increase your savings rate, put away more. You could potentially be a little bit more aggressive with those investments, potentially to get a higher return. You can reduce what your cost of living or your expenses are expected to be in retirement. You can increase your income. There's only a certain number of variables that you could potentially implement in order to, put yourself back on that retirement path, or delay retirement is, of course, an option too. So you have to look at it, see where you are today, where you want to be, and if you're going to need to adjust any of those expectations that you have going in.
All right, just a couple more questions before we wrap up here. And one of them is, I think a lot of parents, or at least some of them, may have faced this, that their adult children may need some financial help. And sometimes, you know, the parents take out their retirement money. What's your recommendation there?
I think you have to be very careful, and I think you have to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. I think, you know, in terms of retirement assets and monies, those are monies that are typically irreplaceable. You're not going to replace that back. So depending on what the need is and what the help is for, I think you really have to understand what you're doing, because in many cases, you may be actually hindering your child by lending them that money. And I'll give you a perfect example. We had a family that we work with that the daughter was looking to move into a new home, and she wanted to move to a new neighborhood, and it was a much bigger home. It was a more affluent neighborhood, and the mom wanted to, you know, lend or give our child some money. And I said, hey, you know, have you put serious thought into this? And she said, you know, not necessarily. And I said, well, would your daughter and son-in-law be able to afford this home if it wasn't for you? And she said, absolutely not. So I said, well, what's going to happen? I said, you're putting her in a unique position where she wouldn't be able to afford the home otherwise. So is she going to be able to afford everything else that goes along with the home? The repairs, the upkeep, the kids going to school with other kids who may be driving different cars, wearing different clothes. And she was like, you know what? I never thought about that. So instead of helping her with the house, she actually put it on her daughter to make that decision. And she offered to help with other things to furnish the house and things like that. Because I think we have to be careful. We want our kids to be successful. We want them to be self-sufficient, but we also don't want to put them in a position that is going to actually hinder them long term, or ourselves by tapping into retirement assets that we're not necessarily going to be able to replace.
All right, we just have a minute here, and final question. You mentioned a lot of things today. As a wealth advisor, what's the top thing you tell your clients when it comes to retirement?
The bottom line is start early. The earlier you start, the better position you're going to be in. You get the benefit of what we call the eighth wonder of the world, which is compound interest. It is a huge benefactor to being successful towards your retirement. So figure out early on, early age, how much you could put away, try to stretch yourself, get it invested, and have it working for you in the best possible way to put you in the best position. Many times when we're young, we put it off because we say, oh, I don't have enough money now, I'll do it when I'm earning more. The reality is when you're older and you're earning more, you have more responsibilities, more expenses pulling at that money. So carve out a sufficient amount. See if you can, defer 10%, start with that number and see where that takes you, and then evaluate it over time to make sure you're on the path you want to be on.
All right. Thank you so much, Lawrence, today for your insight.
Thanks, Don. Appreciate it.